Imagine, if you will, a narrative like this in someone's head. Maybe it's someone you work with alongside them, or maybe it's someone you work for. I am the last line of defense. This is not arrogance. This is the reality of my position. I am the person this organization hired to make sure nothing gets through that shouldn't. Every request that lands on my desk, every new initiative, every innovative idea that someone is excited about at 9 in the morning, well, my job's to ask the question they apparently didn't ask themselves. What happens when this goes wrong? And things do go wrong. I have seen it. I have the reports, the postmortems, the incident analyses that nobody else bothers to read. I know what an unvetted system looks like 6 months after launch. I know what happens when enthusiasm overshadows due diligence. So when my colleagues come to me frustrated because I'm slowing them down, or when I notice that certain meetings happen without me, I understand. I get it. I do. But I also understand something they don't. Slow is safe. Caution is competence. And if they would just bring me in earlier, give me more time, and stop treating my process as an obstacle rather than a protection, well, then we would all be better off. I am not the problem. I am the solution that nobody appreciates. Phew, right? Here's the thing. That person believes every word of that. And I have worked with this person before, and I'm sure you've run into this person as well. I've even coached an executive with this mindset. It is stubborn. It is closed off, and it is a giant roadblock to progress. My client was an executive VP and deeply experienced in her field, cybersecurity. So one could say, well, of course, Christina, she probably has the strengths that would be completely appropriate for that job. And I would agree, up to a point. In its simplest manifestation, these people are gatekeepers. Taken to an extreme, however, these are the people we see who refuse to negotiate, insist that they're the last line of defense, and demand that everyone slow down to their pace, whether it's justified or not. They love control. And when they're in a position of authority, they can really cause problems for other people. So let's talk again about how we might see these behaviors, and I'm going to connect it again to the Hogan assessment. This is what we're going to look at today as it relates to behaviors that can derail our best efforts. So back to my client who happened to have high scores in 3 areas that are considered protective when someone feels that control gives them power. I will go through those today. So while my client believed she had the best strengths to lead cybersecurity, there are rules, there are protocols, there are no exceptions. She also couldn't see that her colleagues had stopped bringing her their best ideas 2 years earlier, that innovation in her organization had rerouted itself around her department, that the talented people on her team had learned through frustrating experience that the path of least resistance was to build workarounds rather than work with her, because a real solution required her approval, and her approval had become pretty elusive, like Bigfoot. So she was doing her job exactly as she understood it, and she had also become the obstacle that an entire organization would work around in order to get anything done. Specifically, people stopped coming to her directly, and she would find out projects were close to completion from the leadership team. Right? No one was collaborating with her, and she didn't need to be involved until the end when they needed it to go live. So this is a very bitter pill to swallow for people with a restrictive mindset. She told me she had no idea that's why people were avoiding her. And that's the thing about people who build walls. They never see it. Today we're talking about the immovable boss, the leader whose caution has become obstruction, whose skepticism has devolved into mistrust, whose silence has become a weapon. If you have one of these bosses, or if somewhere in the back of your mind you're wondering if you've ever been one, this video is for you. I'm Christina Holloway. For over 25 years, I've coached senior leaders at organizations like Google, GE, and Spotify to architect their authority and navigate the high-stakes politics of the Fortune 500. On this channel, I show you how to recognize the power plays hiding in plain sight and how to communicate with the presence that demands a seat at the table. Last week, we talked about the passive-aggressive trap, the boss or colleague who moves in the shadows and works around you quietly. Today, we're adding the next chapter to the direct response playbook. This one doesn't move in the shadows. This one simply doesn't move at all. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about what's actually happening beneath the surface, because the immovable boss is frequently misread. Your first instinct is probably that this person is difficult, or maybe arrogant, or maybe political, or maybe just not particularly good at their job. In my experience, that's not necessarily it. This is much more nuanced. The immovable boss is not obstructing you because they don't care. They are obstructing you because they are afraid. A person who doesn't want to take chances or doesn't trust their own instinct or even someone else's professional perspective is afraid of failure, sure, but also afraid of the unknown. This is about managing risk, and they do not like navigating risk. Like I mentioned, the Hogan identifies what it calls derailers. These are behavioral patterns that emerge under stress and pressure, and they can undermine leadership effectiveness over time. For the immovable boss, 3 scales tell this story. The first is the cautious scale. Hogan describes this as risk aversion, fear of failure, and avoiding criticism. A high cautious leader avoids taking even minimal risks. They have trouble making decisions without a great deal of advice and input. They are more concerned with avoiding mistakes than making contributions. The problem is that under stress, they're never ready. The second is the reserve scale. This leader seems tough, aloof, and uncommunicative. They are unconcerned with building relationships, unfazed by the frustration of others, and unlikely to tell you what would actually change their mind. The reserved boss is not cold because they don't feel anything. They are closed off because showing what they feel, including doubt, uncertainty, or fear, is a vulnerability, and it is not something they're willing to do. Their silence is not neutrality, it is armor. The third is the skeptical scale. This person mistrusts motives and intentions. They assume at some level that people around them have agendas. They resist feedback. They hold grudges. To be clear, they may not act on grudges, but they never forget who crossed them. They are shrewd about organizational politics precisely because they expect to be outmaneuvered. Bringing a new idea to a highly skeptical boss is not a creative conversation. It is an interrogation where you may be pummeled with questions that you think are unrelated, and they presume you're unprepared until proven otherwise. Now, here's what happens when these 3 scales combine in a single leader. They're a handful, right? You have someone who is afraid to be wrong, unwilling to show that fear, and fundamentally suspicious of the people asking them to take a risk. That person cannot say yes. Yes feels like exposure, and exposure is the one thing their entire behavioral architecture is designed to prevent. If you're a smart, capable person, which you are, and you're just trying to contribute new ideas, then this type of obstacle is very frustrating. You have been trying to win an argument with an immovable boss. That is the wrong approach. So not every immovable boss looks the same. In my coaching practice, I've seen this pattern express itself in 3 distinct ways. Each one creates its own kind of stagnation, and each one requires a slightly different response. So let's discuss these as 3 wall types. The first is the approval wall. This is the most recognizable version. This person is very high on the cautious scale. Nothing gets through. Every proposal meets the same response. There are more questions, more requirements, more processes. The approval wall is not evaluating your idea on its merits. They are building a case for why it cannot proceed. Their caution is not discernment. It is default obstruction dressed as due diligence. So what makes this wall particularly exhausting is that it appears to be engaged, right? They ask questions. They request revisions. They schedule follow-up meetings. They always, hey baby. There is always another step before a decision can be made, and each step feels like progress until you realize you have been moving in circles. You can come in. Are you coming in? No? Okay, you can stay there. You know this wall. It was never going to be good enough because good enough was never the standard being applied. There we go. The second is the moving wall. This one's more disorienting than the approval wall because it occasionally says yes, but the yes always comes with conditions. And when you meet the conditions, new conditions appear. The goalposts move every time you get close to approval. The moving wall is managing you through perpetual incompletion. The skeptical scale runs strong here. This boss is never quite convinced your motives are pure, so they are never quite ready to fully commit. There is always one more thing, one more stakeholder to consult, one more quarter to wait for better timing. The specific pain you may be feeling in this exhaustion is the exhaustion of almost getting there repeatedly. A lot of projects typically end up in an innovation holding pattern. The third is the invisible wall. This is the most sophisticated and the most damaging of the three. The invisible wall never says no directly. They say, let me think about it. Let's revisit this next quarter. I want to make sure we have full organizational alignment before we move forward. Ideas don't get rejected by the invisible wall. They get delayed until they die of natural causes. The reserved scale is dominant here. This boss will not show you what would actually convince them because they have no intention of being convinced. They have in their toolkit an infinite number of ways of telling you no, and absolutely no way of telling you yes. The reason this wall is so difficult to navigate is that you cannot respond to it. There is no clear path forward, no specific direction, no defined standard to meet. The wall is invisible because it never shows itself directly. And you cannot dismantle something you cannot see. Here's what all three walls have in common. This is important to understand. They believe their caution is respected. They believe leadership values their judgment. They believe, truly believe, they are protecting the organization from decisions it would regret. What they rarely see is that the organization has usually built its own roads around them, that the most talented people on their teams have either stopped trying or worse, started leaving. That the innovation they were hired to protect has simply moved to a place where it does not require their approval. Walls do not see this because walls do not move. But everything that matters eventually does. Progress happens. You can't stop it. So why do smart, capable, experienced professionals keep failing to move these walls? Because they keep using force. We talked about overfunctioning, and this is another example of where we may receive resistance and just decide to double down on proving why our idea has merit. This is hard. If you've fallen into this trap, that's actually quite normal. It's okay. I've done it too. We create better proposals, more data, more patience, more process, but that's not what it was ever about. Here's the fundamental misunderstanding driving all of that effort. You are treating this as a logic problem. We deserve validation. And this walled-off person is never going to give you that because the wall is not using logic like you are. The wall is managing its own fear. And you cannot reason someone out of a position they did not reason themselves into. They arrived where they are through fear, mistrust, and a compulsive need to avoid being wrong. The trap is in their assumptions. Every time you go back with a better argument, you are confirming that the wall's strategy is working. You're demonstrating that obstruction produces effort, and effort for a wall is not a problem. It's the point. While you're busy refining your proposal, the wall is exactly where it wants to be, unmoved, in control, protected. Now let's talk about physics for a minute. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? It's the irresistible force paradox. An unstoppable force, you, with your innovative ideas that represent the future of the business, meeting an immovable object, that gatekeeping boss, has two options. That unstoppable force is either going to break apart or break through. To break apart, meaning you give up, you disengage, you take your idea somewhere else or nowhere at all, or to break through, possibly creating a confrontation that no one wants and maybe damaging your standing in the organization. Neither option serves you. Let's find another way. Let's talk about a third option that removes force as a way to deal with an obstacle. You are building the road around it. That's going to take influence. So I'm going to give you 5 moves that you can add to your direct response playbook for the immovable boss. I already introduced this playbook in my last video about working with passive aggressive people. You can catch that video right here. Here are 5 moves. So let's get into it. Move number 1, name the wall's fear. Before you do anything else, Identify what this person is actually afraid of. Cautious fears blame. Skeptical fears betrayal. Reserved fears exposure. The fear is the operating system running underneath every no. When you know the specific fear driving the obstruction, you stop taking the no personally and start responding strategically. You are no longer pushing against the wall. You are reading the wall's architecture, and that influences your next move. Move number 2, find where your idea amplifies the fear. Every proposal that gets blocked is triggering something specific. So ask yourself, does my idea make this person feel irrelevant? Does it bypass their authority? Does it expose a gap in their domain or expertise? Does it require them to publicly commit to something that could fail? What are the actual chances of that happening? You are looking for the exact intersection of your innovation and their vulnerability, because that's where the gatekeeping begins. Redesign your approach to reduce the perceived threat without compromising the integrity of the idea. Move number 3, build your coalition before you need it. By the time you walk into the room with your proposal, the conversation should already be won elsewhere. Lateral peers who support the idea, upward visibility with leadership who see its value, organizational momentum that exists independently of any single approval conversation. A wall says no most easily when it's just the two of you, or they position themselves to do you a favor by presenting your idea to higher ups. It's about control. A wall has a significantly harder time saying no to a coalition that has already said yes. Move number 4, protect your idea, not just yourself. A wall will not come after you directly. It will quietly eliminate your idea to maintain the status quo. Your job is to give your idea an independent life beyond any single conversation or approval moment. Document it. Socialize it broadly. Create a record of support, refinement, and organizational relevance that exists whether or not this particular boss ever says yes. Separate your identity from the initiative so that when the wall pushes back, it's pushing back against something larger than you. Move number 5, control your timeline. Walls win by exhaustion. Your idea does not get rejected per se. It gets delayed until you give up or move on. Your response is to make the timeline visible. Milestones, stakeholder check-ins, documented progress shared broadly across the organization. When delay becomes visible, indefinite obstruction becomes harder to sustain. So, you know the executive, my client from the beginning of this video? She was doing exactly what she believed she was hired to do. And when we talked about what her colleagues were experiencing on the other side of her wall, she had no idea. This is a blind spot, and it's rooted in good intentions gone horribly wrong. That's the most important thing I want you to take from today. The immovable boss is rarely aware of the damage they're causing. Their internal logic is airtight. Their intentions are genuine. And really good evidence of you dealing with one of these people is that you're going to start seeing all these side roads and workarounds that other people created that are intended to make progress without upsetting this person. If you are navigating one of these bosses right now, consider that the direct response playbook gives you the side road around the wall. As an unstoppable force, you are going to find a way around that wall. It's inevitable. Next week, we're going deeper, the micromanaging playbook. What to do when your boss cannot let go, cannot trust, and cannot stop standing between you and your own best work. Same series, same playbook principle, different challenge entirely. If today's video resonated with you, if you recognize the wall or the fear behind it, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me which wall type you are dealing with right now, because naming it is always the first move in finding a healthy way forward. Don't forget, my free communication toolkit is linked in the description below. It includes the boundary statements and frameworks we have referenced throughout this series. I'm Christina Holloway. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.